So welcome to class number 1 of the UX design and Adobe XD workshop. And you guys know me, and for the ones that don't, I'm Pedro Posmi. I'm the creative director at WebCreek. And again, hopefully this helps all of you to understand and implement some of the concepts that we work on in the department, as well as the UX designer. So the session topics, we're going to cover 5 really brief ideas. One is, what is user experience design? The second one is 12 key terms that you will hear designers use on a daily basis, and stuff that you can use for either sales, business analysis, development, and so forth. The roles within UX design. What is user-centered design, which is sort of like a specific focus within UX, and how we approach UX in WebCreek. Okay, so what is user experience design? Let's clear certain things before that. User experience as a term refers to the interaction users have with the product or service. It's commonly referred to the interaction between people and technological products, because the user term relates to human-computer interaction disciplines. But it, as you will see throughout the presentation, it expands to different things. Actually, user experience and user experience design comes a long way. In particular, one of the breakthroughs that this sort of like concept had, it was not known as user experience back then, but it was World War I and World War II, where things had to be produced so quickly and they had to be so efficient that that paved the way to like the establishment of industrial production, where you had to have like guns, helmets, tanks, and things that like people that are not like, I don't know, I don't want to say they're not the smartest, but they don't have any like preparation to use those kinds of things, to do so in a very rapid way, right? So that's sort of like where the concept really started in, and it has evolved to what we hear now, and with this applied to IT and to technology specifically. So if that is user experience design considers each and every element that shapes that experience, right? So the goal to UX is basically to create efficient, relevant, and pleasant experience for the users. And that's why UX designers usually tend to combine a lot of skills besides visuals, which can be market research, product development, strategy, and all the things that we use to shape those experiences and think about the services and processes within. And they help build a bridge between the customer, because it facilitates the discussions in order to understand user needs and expectations. This is a brief example on the distinction between both. So let's think about an application that some of you might have used, which is Tinder. For example, if we think about the user experience perspective of a Tinder user, if we talk to someone, perhaps a woman, this is obviously fictional, but we can find something like this, right? This girl right here is saying, I've tried Tinder, but there are only creeps and perverts there, right? I wish I could meet someone who's not only into the looks, and I would like to feel more safe and find someone in a more romantic way, right? So this is what they're saying. This is what they're experiencing when they're using the application. So when UX designers analyze and try to make like conclusions of what the problem might be for certain users, and what solutions we can present. For example, a UX designer might say, okay, according to like certain users that might feel that way, they seem to be concerned about the safety and aggressive personalities of other users, especially women. So why don't we make a product focused on providing, I don't know, security background checks, and without an emphasis on profile pictures, so people don't only rely on their looks, and everything is a little bit more democratized, if you may. So hopefully this makes sense as an example of what is user experience and what user experience designers do from that perspective, right? And you might have heard about user interface as well. So let's see how that comes into play. UI is actually a part of UX. There is no such thing as UX versus UI because they go hand in hand. UI refers to the actual interface of a product that users interact with. You know, the visual design of the screens the user navigates when using software products, which in turn the interaction, the usage that they give to that product produces the experience, which is UX. Right? UI design is concerned with the visuals, the interactive elements, as I was saying, and that relates to what you guys might have seen from us: the typography, color palettes, to animation, navigation, things like that. So again, there's not such thing as UX versus UI. They are complementary, and actually UI is sort of like a part of the UX umbrella. And because when you're creating an interface, when you're designing a screen visually, you're influencing the experience. If you make buttons super small, you're not providing a good experience. And obviously the experience cannot really exist if there is not an interface to perform tasks with, right? And this is sort of like, I mean, even though they're related, they are kind of different. So UX is more related to the psychological part, to understanding people. You know, like that's why there's this famous concept of user research, where we UX designers, for the most part, like hardcore UX designers, actually do like they don't design visual a whole lot. They focus on understanding what the problem is, what the users are facing, what they need to complete their goals. And the UI designers, the ones that, I mean, you can be a UX designer and focus only on UI because, again, you're influencing the experience. You might focus only on visual design, layout, branding, typography, and things like that. So in conclusion, like UX focuses on research, analyzing user feedback, and creating the logic of the solution. In the case of UI, you focus on the visuals, interpreting. It's very common that you work with UX designers to interpret the logic they came up with after their research to create those interfaces that are aligned with goals. We're going to see how this works at WebCreek, but it's important that you guys draw the difference for these two for now. Okay, there's a very infamous example around the internet about the difference between UI and UX with the Heinz tomato, the ketchup bottles, and it has a couple of flaws. So if you see this around, try to understand it from this perspective. The most famous image we see is the one that you say that the older bottle, the one that was made with glass. It was the like very standard position was UI, and when they changed it recently a couple of years ago to have this plastic bottle upside down, it was UX because you can dosify it properly and the bottle doesn't explode when you tap it and things like that. But that is wrong. There's another image that is closer to being more accurate, which says that both of those bottles are UI, which is kind of true. And the UX is, for example, people actually using that bottle. This is closer to the concept, but this is still drawing the difference that these two bottles are either good or bad depending on the perspective. That is not necessarily true because you have to think about the experience of users from all different sorts of perspectives, and that involves both users and business. So, for example, whenever these two bottles were designed, they were done at different times. You know, plastic came in the 50s and the 60s, and so by the time Heinz created the glass bottle, it was probably the best decision by that time, in the sense of both business and what users were using the product for. So there are a lot of variables to consider. I mean, one thing is UX, but when you're judging what is a good UX, there's all sorts of stuff that you need to consider. And those can be user goals, type of users, time period constraints, production budget, materials, fluid behavior, competitors, technology advancement. So a more accurate version of this, it would be that like the experience is inherent to the context. So both are UI and both have their own UX, because in this case the UI itself does not represent a good or bad UX. Both fit the constraints and requirements according to the time period, users, and other factors that belong to each. Okay, so hopefully this makes sense. Another good example about this is Uber Eats, and this is sort of closer to home or a little more recent. And this is one that's very interesting to me, because it's one of the flagship experience products and experiences out there that sort of like showcase this, right? One thing is sort of like the consumer, the client experience, let's say, is people who don't want to mobilize, who want to have like very quick options on a single source to order food, to have it at a certain time, and to be billed and to pay it for digitally, right? So obviously there are all other options within it, but that's sort of like the goal that they're trying to that they're pursuing. And the interface of the application gives them the possibility to act on that goal, right? They can pursue that goal using this product. But the interesting part of this is that, and this is when we talk about platforms, is that we, the people that might like, let's talk generally, actually, people that actually order food, they're only one type of user. This platform has other types of users. They have like I would say like 6 to 7 types of users. But the other important perspective on this is that some of you might know as well, is the driver, is the people that perform the deliveries. They have their own interface because they pursue different goals. What is their goal? They're working for, well, they're working with and for Uber, and they're trying to provide a service by delivering food, right? So their goal has different requirements, has different moments, so, which is why they might use a phone as you and I, but they might pursue different goals, right? They want to see location, they want to see timing, they want to see type of payment, and they want to log maybe different orders that they want to do during the day. They might have 3, 4, 5 orders that they have to give visibility to. So that is sort of like, and the experience of drivers in being notified, and looking at the location with live real-time maps. That is the experience that is being enforced while they're using the application, which has their own UI, right? Tinder is also a great example about how UI influences the experience. There are a lot of dating apps out there, and and obviously you guys know about this. This is nothing new, but Tinder had success basically on a UI feature, like the swipe left to the right. It was so important for the company that it revolutionized the concept of dating. In my opinion, like, I don't know, I want to say ethically, I'm not sure it's entirely positive, because it obviously gives you a very like shallow experience at selecting who you want to date. Obviously, it's a casual experience. But other than that, I mean, the UI example is it's actually closer to what we also call gamification. It's like, it's really fun. Like, you're not going into a profile with a lot of information that you have to read about users. No, you just focus on their profile pictures, and you either say yes or no by swiping left to right. And that is a really great experience that I think Tinder users obviously love and appreciate. And I want to talk about another example again, that it's not necessarily related to applications or to software, but and how user and customer experience affects any type of thing. And it's something that happened to me recently. I had a baby well, my wife and I had a baby 2 months ago, and we were looking for bottles, for feeding. And I did a lot of research, and I found these online. They had great reviews, and they look great. The materials are amazing. Like, it's made of like super nice silicone. The design is really slick and stuff. But when I actually bought it and I started using it, I mean, you can see throughout the videos and throughout the reviews, they're amazing, right? And maybe I missed some of these reviews, but when I use it, for example, at nighttime, which is sort of like the worst time, when you're like super tired and try to feed your kid, this bottle is transparent. Like, the silicone doesn't allow you to read at all, what the measures are and what you're supposed to give your baby. So, for example, for me, I love the design. It sells super nice. It feels great. The materials are awesome, but I'm having a bad experience just because of a little like design flaw, and that is something also you can consider as an example of a bad experience from my experience. So let's go quickly through some terms that you might have heard from us or from the industry that I think are important to learn. So user-centered design, we're going to cover this a little more in a few minutes, but it basically means that you emphasize the presence of the end user throughout the design process. Decades ago, we were really accustomed to only like work from the development standpoint and say, no, we interpret that the requirements are this, and we take our own hypothesis to tell you how you should use this, right? And now there are so many options out there for any type of product that you really need to involve users if you want to have a competitive advantage, and you want to have your product be useful because you're attending a specific need, only if you include these people in your design process. Usability. It's just basically how easy it is to use either an interface or a product. If it's not easy, it's sort of like a degree. If you go to a website and you have from 1 to 10, you can measure how usable a product is. Can I find things quickly? You're reducing usability. Like call to actions are clear. You're increasing usability because it helps you use the product and reach your goals. Accessibility. It's basically the concept where we talk about enabling people with disabilities to interact with the product, independent of what those disabilities might be. It's one of the interesting things that you might have seen in Zoom or actually any other product that deals with statuses. It's interesting for how the pattern where we see like positive things are green and negative, alarming things are red. For people with visual impairment, for example, that is some people that have color blindness, for example. It's hard to interpret, because if you can't see, how can you make a decision about what the system is trying to tell you? So you have to. I mean, that's a common pattern. It's not inherently a bad thing if you use it again, but accessibility is a concept where we try to make sure that a broad range of users are comfortably using our products. User research. This is part of user-centered design, and it's at the heart of it, because you do research with users allow you to understand what they need, what they're looking for, and if you, for example, if you have already an undergoing product, what are the pain points? What are the obstacles that they facing to reach their goals? That's why we talk about lean and agile methodologies, because users change. They change their preferences. They look for certain things. They learn more, and that's why products should follow suit. You do updates, you improve things, you remove things, because you're constantly throwing hypotheses from the research that you're doing to your users. You're doing it with your users. A persona. A persona is an artifact, as I call it. It's after we do research, we build representations of the target users. For example, let's say we have a construction application. We know engineers and people that work on the field in construction have huge hands because of their line of work, right? They have large fingers. So that is something that a persona can remind us of constantly when we're building interfaces, and after we do the research, we say, hey, like the guys that work on the field and we're doing a tablet application and they're using gloves or they have huge hands, dude, we need to make things larger because they have to use it that way. So that is why a persona is so like important also throughout the design process. It reminds us of who are we designing for. User flows. And this is a more broad concept that is not only used by designers, but pretty much everyone from developers, QA analysts, and business analysts. They basically illustrate the steps a user can take to complete a task from beginning to end. We're going to learn how to do one of these with Adobe XD. There are a lot of better tools to do it with, but I think it's going to serve the purpose of how to learn the tool and using that as an example on a later session. A wireframe. Think of a wireframe as a blueprint of a screen, right? We don't care about details. We don't care about looks. We care about how to distribute the information in relation to the goals that we're pursuing. Sorry, in relation to the goals that users are pursuing and that we are trying to help them with, right? They're what we call a low fidelity representation of a website or of an application layout and content. A prototype. This is an outline of the proposed final product, and they can be low fidelity, like paper and pen could be the very basic idea of that. A mid-fidelity prototype can be a wireframe, as we saw just a moment ago. And high fidelity can be what we're going to learn on this workshop, which is to build an Adobe XD web prototype. A design system. A design system is a series of components that can be reused in different combinations. As you've seen at WebCreek, we have clients that we've worked with that would work with over the years, and they tend to extend their products and their services, like they scale it within the same bounds. You know, like people, clients like Neighbors, clients like Aegis, they have systems and products that we've helped them build for years, but they align with a certain experience, right? And that's related again to the visuals, to the branding, to the components, to the colors. So in order to build that and to manage it sustainably, we need to make a design system that sort of like documents how these components look and behave like. Mobile first. Mobile first is an approach that involves designing a desktop site with the mobile version first, which then could be adapted to larger screens because it's easier to design, like start from small and then expand to large than working from a larger perspective and reducing it to a screen like a mobile phone, right? Responsive. It's an approach where we take the content of a web page or product and we render it across a variety of devices and windows on other screens. And then the sense of resolution, which is kind of related to these two, it's the number of individual pixels a specific display has. For example, if we are to build a prototype for an iPhone, we probably need to learn that the really first iPhone had a 320 by 480 base resolution within the screen, you know, and that sort of like give us a boundary or where we can place elements and how things are going to be rendered, not only for that device but for the others as well. So in terms of roles, there's a lot of discussion about this as well. And as I told you at the beginning of this is a career that is growing extremely fast, and there's a lot of roles that are being multiplied and are born every day, you know. And again, this is a common question that some of you might have been thinking of, or that I have heard at least, is that do I need to be good at visuals to be a UX designer, or do I need to learn how to code? Not necessarily. Okay, so in the spectrum of things that you usually do for like UX, which can be from doing user research to actual implementation with development, there's a spectrum, right? And for example, a UX researcher doesn't need to necessarily prototype. I mean, it's good that you do, but it doesn't necessarily need to prototype and design or code to make an implementation. There are like certain companies that actually prefer, for example, larger firms or enterprises like Facebook, Google, or any of those companies have groups absolutely dedicated to doing user research, and they hire UX research to focus on doing research and ideation, which is like basically requirement gathering and defining the logic. But you can also be, for example, a UI designer, as we were talking about, right? That this is where you're crossing the line a little bit between ideation and prototyping and design, because you need to understand what the UX researcher might have come from and trying to interpret that with a screen. Full-blown UX designers, I was telling you guys, it's sort of like a mix of both, right? We know how to research with users, we know how to interpret requirements, and we know how to place them on the screen, but we don't necessarily know how to implement things with code. And this is where a funny term comes into play, which is the UX unicorn, right? Which is something that is extremely rare. I mean, I've seen several people actually excel at that, but it's rare, you know. People who know how to do user research, who know how to interpret requirements, who are excellent at visual design, and know how to code and how to implement. You know, that is rare. But there are a lot of roles, and even within these, there are micro roles that are growing even more recently. For example, there are UX copywriters that only focus on doing copy for products and how things read out and how they're understood while users are using it. Recently there's a role focused only on that. So if you ever wanna I don't know, if you want to change careers and explore different things, there are a lot of things you can do within this industry. User-centered design. I love this phrase by Frank Camara. He's a very famous designer. He says that people ignore design that ignores people. This is coming back to what I mentioned at the beginning, where user-centered design is a focus of any type of design, actually, where you focus on putting users at the center of design and development. And when a team develops digital products, it takes into account the user requirements, objectives, and feedback, and that's what ultimately drives design. A common structure of phases for this process includes these four sections. First, doing research and understanding the context of use. Ideation, where you specify user requirements. Third, you design the solution, and lastly, you evaluate against the requirements. And this is an iterative process where at the very end, when you launch, for example, an MVP of your mobile application, you have to evaluate it. You have to see what users think of it. Can they use it? Can they, I don't know, if you're doing a banking app, let's say, can they do transactions? Can they, I don't know, submit a complaint about something that happened, and was that solved quickly? Okay, we found out there are problems, there are good things, but there are also problems, so we need to go back again. Let's understand the context of use of that MVP. Let's just specify new user requirements and perform an update. Let's work on a prototype and then launch it and evaluate it again. That's what a lot of companies do. That's why you might have seen on apps like Facebook, for example, that they tend to change the navigation a lot. They put it at the top, they put it at the bottom, they reduce icons, they give you more access, they add stuff, they remove stuff, they change the color of buttons, they give you new things. And this is because of this process. They're finding out constantly that people needs are changing constantly, and they need to enforce change. So brief examples. I think we're good on time. The first one that comes to mind that I really like, and these are from my experience, and again, I think this is an example of how user-centered design works. Google Home. I don't know if someone uses this. I have one at home. I really like it. I don't use it to the extent that Google claims it can be used, but it's interesting because voice controlled UI, which is this case, you talk to an assistant, the Google Assistant, in order to play music, to give you answer to a question, to play background sounds, to give you a recipe or whatever, there are a lot of products that are doing this now, like Alexa and other AI assistants have their own designs, right? But for example, when I look at stuff like Alexa, it works great, it looks cool, but I wouldn't really want to place it. This is just a personal opinion, but I wouldn't really want to place it in my living room because it jumps to your eye. It looks like something from the future. It looks cool, don't get me wrong, but it doesn't fit with your environment. It's like really techy. It's like almost aggressive, in my opinion. And for example, Google learned that if people are going to use this, they might have use it as part of their decoration, as part of how it can be even unnoticed, throughout their homes. And that's why after research, maybe they learned that these items need to not stand out. They need to mimetize with the environment, right? So I think that is an important concept. For Apple, iPod, their flagship product, again, they understood, obviously, at least years ago, they were known for innovation, right? But innovation precisely came from that, understanding the change technology was doing in people, and I'm pretty sure some of you remember when we used to carry music without phones, without an iPod. It was all about Walkmans and Discmans, and you had to carry 10 CD cases or a collection of CDs just to hear your music. And that at the moment, inherently, that was not a problem. But Apple found an opportunity on giving people a single source of access to all the music that you can carry in your pocket. So I think that was a massively important principle that led them to afterwards creating iPhone and all the technology that for smartphones and smart devices actually that are still present throughout the day. And for Uber, again, the whole premise of this was born from user-centered design, right? It's not like the guys that created this started one morning and said, you know what, maybe we should work on doing an application to order cabs. That should be cool, and you can get some money from that. I think obviously the principle that drive the business was that, but whenever you're shaping the experience of people that are consuming it, you need to learn the problems, especially in Latin America. Look at us, like at least in Ecuador, and that's has been the experience even today. Like if you go in a yellow cab, like let's say a public cab, um, they smell terrible. They usually change the way they charge the fees. It's not comfortable. Like they drive horribly. The guys are not polite. Sometimes you for example, if it's raining, you have to stand on the street and wait for a cab, and all those problems can be addressed by an application. But it's when you understand them, you can actually enforce change. For another cool thing about Uber, for example, it's like I think it was a couple of years ago they added this function when you can share your live location to another user, and they can track wherever you are to make you feel safer. Because again, in Ecuador, it's not common, but it happens uh, here and there where I don't know, like someone gets robbed on a cab, and you're taking to the edge of the city, and no one knows where you are, and and that sort of thing. So that kind of feature makes people safer, but because we learn that they're experiencing those issues, those challenges. So then designers said and obviously product developers, they said hey, that is a problem that we can solve with this particular feature in the application. Okay, and let's talk about UX at WebCreek. We focus on a user-centered design, but sadly, the emphasis at the moment is not on research. At the moment, our UX efforts focus on interpreting and translating client requirements into usable UIs. So it's not common that we have access to users, and mainly it's because of confidentiality clauses, but we're working towards finding a way to include real users in order to perform research and actually evaluate the designs that we came up with. And it's not all bad because several clients come with user feedback, come with user comments from the get-go, but it's kind of biased. It's mostly on their end. And again, it's not like you can't design without them. You can. It's just that you're raising if you do user research and you evaluate the designs that you're trying to put forward, you're increasing the odds of your product addressing real problems and real needs. But yeah, I mean, and from the sense of the roles, business analysts and UX designers, especially in the last year, have begun to work closely together by understanding requirements and business goals and translating them into usable interface for the specific users of that project, right? Because with these two phases, I mean, they work together. But for example, it's a good combination where business analysts interpret those requirements and UX designers work with them to give them shape as an interface. Oops, sorry, the graphic is removed here, but let me fix that real quick. Oh, there it is. Okay, let's look at it from here. Within this process, we have different artifacts, as we call it, and they are like UX deliverables, in a better term, that provide certain information, right? Be that a user persona, a flow, a sitemap, or a prototype, they'll contribute to the better understanding of the user goals and the business requirements. So what we usually do is that we have stakeholder interviews, specifically with the client, and we have a set of requirements in like a specific context where we define the personas that we were talking about, right? Who are we designing for? How many users do we have? The user flows, they represent like the key actions that those users are going to perform. Okay, let's talk about, I don't know, client like neighbors. Okay, I'm drilling an oil well. I want to have I don't know, the speed, the torque, and the depth of my bit, the one that I'm working with. Okay, so if those are your goals, we're gonna the system is gonna give you sections where you can look at that information, right? And we can use a user flow to say, okay, you log in, you go to the first section, and there you're gonna find, I don't know, the torque information about that operation, let's say. Then we work in parallel with sitemaps where we organize the information basically. So now we know the actions that they need to perform, but the sitemap allows us to define how many sections we're going to have, how's the navigation going to be structured, and what type of information is going to be within each section, right? So after we know all this, we proceed to design a prototype. Okay, we distribute, okay, I'm going to have a horizontal navigation bar, and we're going to have 4 sections there. I'm going to have the user icon where I can click and I can either log out or see my profile. You know, those kinds of things related to the goals and to the distribution that we already defined. And again, obviously, we're not evaluating against requirements with real users, but obviously, in this case, we do that with the client. They approve what we ultimately design. Okay. Oh, there's an animation there. Okay. And the sense of UX standards, the team, this is just for information purposes, but I think they're very, like, there are core sources of knowledge within certain things. So for example, we are continuously training and learning about usability from certified sources, which can be Nielsen Norman Group, which is one of the most famous, if not the most famous, usability research and learning organization that there is. There are also sources like usability.gov where you have like basic concepts, templates to perform, I don't know, interviews and things like that are like specific techniques of certain processes. And we also like approach UI with components and patterns that work, like material design, UI patterns, and things like that. There's a larger conversation about this, but I don't think it's going to work for this workshop, but they're there. This is what we use on a daily basis as a source of knowledge, if you may, and that's for you guys to know. So before we dive into the questions, there are some final notes for this session, and they're like this. Okay, so UX design with a user-centric focus is about people, right? Real users. It's not about, hopefully this is not misinterpreted when we talk to clients. We need to be really careful about that, but it's not about them. It's not about our CEO. It's not about the department head. It's not about us. It's about them. It's about real users. And this is why designing like user experience, it's a humbling process, because you need to take out your ego and your assumptions in order to design something that's valuable. You know, and like knowing who you're designing for increases the chances of the success of your product, because as I was saying, you're addressing real problems instead of making assumptions. The perfect way to understand users is going out and talking and observing them. This is what research is all about. I mean, and I'm going to give you some resources I'm going to share some resources about this. And if you guys delve deep into user research, you're going to see that that's the core principle. Yes, there are techniques, there is structure, there are documentation, but the basic principle is just being social. I personally have a problem with that. I'm not super social. I'm trying to learn more about that. But that's the basic principle, going out and learning from others. Curiosity and empathy, this might come as a surprise, but these are more important skills than visual design for a solid UX designer. And actually, if you see statistics about salary and the business growth in relation to UX, for example, let's say UX research versus UI design, UX researchers are better paid than UI designers, you know, because these, even though they might sound cliche, they are the most important thing about designing products for others, as I was saying. So take that into account. UX design is a process that involves many other areas, or at least it should. I mean, here's the thing: you can design the best user flow and interface, but if the performance of a website is not up to par, you're providing a bad experience for users. So this is a team effort. We need to. That's why we all tend to push to work with developers, with QAs, with everyone to get involved, because the more we learn and the more we know, the more we can control. And so this is why it's a team effort. UX design at WebCreek is focused mostly on interface design and not on user research. This is not bad. This is not inherently bad. It's just a part of the maturity path a lot of companies go through. Again, we're trying to push more of including users on the design process, but it's not easy, like, because that means more budget, that means more time, and that is it's difficult. It takes time to digest. So just so you know, like, if you see us do something that you don't necessarily see otherwhere on other companies, that is not bad. That is just how we roll today, but that can change and that can evolve. So you don't necessarily need to know visual design to practice UX, again, unless you wish to specialize in UI design. There are several roles that are more related to user behavior, actually. It's very common for UX researchers, again, as I was telling you, not to work on visuals at all. They focus on talking to them, on talking to users, understanding how they use products, the problem they're facing, working out the logic of interactions, and not necessarily on screens. So then there are plenty of this is probably the best part about this career. There are plenty of open source research and information available for all levels of knowledge and experience out there. And actually, we're going to be sharing this presentation with you guys. And, like, for example, all these 7 courses are amazing and they're free. And if you go through all of these already, you can start a career right away. You only need the experience. And if you guys want to pursue something different, I think this is a very nice opportunity. And blogs and content sources that I might suggest, and not even just for UX design in particular, there are a lot of interesting things related to new products and new technology from InVision, Smashing Magazine, and a lot of other sources that, again, are open source and they're out there for our benefit. In terms of books, if you want to give into UX a little more and dive into detail, these 4 books are the ones that are my favorites. I've read Don't Make Me Think a couple of times from Steve Krug, and it has so many simple things that you kind of feel dumb by not knowing them already. But it's an excellent book, and they're not expensive. So if you are able to get one of these, I highly recommend them. Podcasts as well. Google Design and UX podcasts are my favorites, and they're very fun. But I say podcasts tend to be a little dense if you're not, like, super into it. So maybe if you want to check out some blogs and read some book first, I don't know, podcasts are also good, but these are, like, a little specialized, if I may. And that's it. So after we go into the questions from you guys, I'm going to share a link where you can leave comments or questions about this session.